Could a World War I explosion have prevented World War II? On February 22nd, 1917, Benito Mussolini is nearly killed in a mortar accident. Mussolini is born in Predappio, Italy in 1883, the son of a blacksmith and a teacher. He is mostly self-educated and works as a teacher and journalist. An outspoken pacifist and Marxist, he leads demonstrations against Italy's war in Libya and is arrested and jailed. He becomes head of the Italian Socialist Party in 1912 and is even praised by Russian communist Vladimir Lenin. When World War I breaks out in 1914, Mussolini vocally denounces it, but he soon reverses position and breaks with the Socialist Party. He begins to advocate for Italy to enter the war on the side of the Allies, hoping his country can recover territory lost to Austria-Hungary in the 19th century. Mussolini enlists in the army and is sent to Italy's northeastern border. An expert marksman, he becomes a skilled sniper. During a training exercise, a mortar explodes, seriously wounding Mussolini and killing 4 of his fellow soldiers. He spends 6 months in the hospital where 44 shell fragments are removed. Stay tuned, because coming up, we're going to learn about Mussolini after World War I. We'll learn about the origin of the word fascism, and we'll learn about Mussolini's rise to power in Italy. We'll also learn about the influence that Mussolini has on another dictator of his era. And finally, we'll tackle that question. If Mussolini had died in this incident in World War I, would there have even been a World War II? Also, don't forget to check out Today in History in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. There's a link in the description. All right, so after World War I, after his injury, okay, Mussolini spends those 6 months in the hospital, and then he's discharged from the army. He goes to Milan and he starts a newspaper that he calls Il Popolo d'Italia, which means the Italian people. And in this newspaper, he attacks, first and foremost, anti-war advocates, which of course is ironic because when the war began, he was as big an anti-war advocate as there was. Additionally, he starts to push this new right-wing ideology that he has adopted. And he and some fellow veterans establish a group known as the Fasci Italiani di Combattimento. Okay? And this is where the term fascism comes from, because this group is eventually known as the Italian fascists. So where does this word fascism come from? Well, the name comes from ancient Rome, actually, and something known as the fasces. Now, this is an important symbol in ancient Rome, and it's made up of a bundle of rods that are tied together, and then there's an axe head within those rods. And this was used as a symbol of power and authority in ancient Rome. So an ancient Roman leader who had what they would have called imperium, which is the authority to speak for Rome. For example, a governor of one of Rome's provinces, etc. They would, when they entered a meeting, entered a room, you would have these bearers known as lictors that would carry these fasces into the room before them, precede them with these. And this was a symbol, hey, this person speaks for Rome. Okay, so it's this very strong symbol of power and authority. And this symbol is used in a lot of artwork, especially in American artwork, in fact. There are numerous works of art featuring George Washington, and there's one very famous sculpture of him in particular, where he's standing next to the fasces, and he's covering the axe head with his cloak. And this is symbolic of the fact that Washington had authority, he had power, but he didn't abuse that power, therefore the cloak covering the axe head within the fasces. Additionally, when you go to the Lincoln Memorial, you'll see on the side of Lincoln's chair, right at the front, okay, you have the fasces decorating the front of that, and that again is the symbol of Abraham Lincoln's power, his authority, his importance, all of that. So anyway, this is a powerful symbol that comes from ancient Rome, and it's one that Mussolini, an Italian, of course, adopts because his goal in Italy is to try to create this new Roman Empire in his mind. Okay, so the fascists, extremely right wing, extremely nationalistic, and anti-socialist, which again is ironic because Mussolini had been a socialist for many years. But now it's swung to the other side of the political spectrum. So this fascist movement grows very rapidly, and so much of it is because of Mussolini's charisma and his powerful ability to do public speaking. He's brilliant at this, and he vociferously attacks the Treaty of Versailles that ends World War I. He feels like Italy has been cheated by this treaty, and that the leaders of Italy had let them down, that the whole reason to get into the war was to get that territory on their border, near their borders that had at one time been part of Italy and had been taken by Austria-Hungary, and that Italy didn't get that. They got very little of it in the Treaty of Versailles, and he feels like that Italy, got the raw end of the deal, and that he's going to make it right. And importantly, he gains the support of wealthy landowners, he gains the support of the army, and ultimately, what is maybe most important, he gains the support of the monarchy itself. Mussolini organizes this group of, it's almost like a street gang. This is like his personal militia, and he calls them the Black Shirts. And they go around, beating people up, especially communists and anyone that might oppose him. He becomes popular enough that in 1922, again, this is just 3 years after the Treaty of Versailles, and just 4 years after the end of World War I. It happens very fast in Italy. So 1922, the King of Italy, Victor Emmanuel III, actually approaches Mussolini and wants to create a coalition government along with him. And once he's in power, he starts to erode these democratic institutions. He starts to take away basic rights. He pushes his ideology. And in 1925, he gives a speech before the Italian parliament where he essentially declares himself the dictator, because he is. And at this point, Italy has become a totalitarian fascist state. And Mussolini himself begins to be referred to as Il Duce, which means, of course, the leader. If any of this sounds familiar, it's because he creates a roadmap for Adolf Hitler to seize power in Germany. Hitler, to begin with, he idolizes Mussolini. He sees what Mussolini has done in Italy, and he's like, I want to do that same thing here. It takes him a little longer, right? But he essentially follows this same process to gain power, or at least a very similar one. And he always, looked up to Mussolini, you might say. Some of it is like almost embarrassingly copycat in its nature. For example, Mussolini has the black shirts. Oh, Hitler has the brown shirts. Very creative. Mussolini's the leader, Il Duce, so Hitler's the leader, der Führer, right? Not much difference there. The relationship does change a little bit as Hitler becomes the more powerful leader, the leader of a more powerful country with a stronger military, and especially as Italy, in Hitler's mind, does not quite live up to its end of the bargain as one of the Axis powers. This power dynamic, it shifts a little bit, and Hitler doesn't love Mussolini quite as much at that point. But, just an example of how much Hitler cared about Mussolini, you might say. When the Allies invade Italy in 1943, and when Italy surrenders to the Allies and deposes Mussolini, Mussolini is imprisoned in the Gran Sasso ski resort in Italy. The thought is, we'll put him way up in the mountains, and no one will be able to get to him, right? Sure. So what does Hitler do? Well, he sends in some special forces using hang gliders, and they come in there and they actually rescue Mussolini and take him to northern Italy and essentially put him back in power in Italy, because northern Italy is still under Axis control, essentially German control at that point. And Mussolini becomes something of I guess you could say, a puppet leader to Hitler at that point. But again, Hitler goes out of his way to save Mussolini. He could have just let him, languish there, but that's not what he does. Additionally, Hitler chooses suicide at the end of World War II, in many ways because he'd seen what happened to Mussolini. Mussolini was captured and brutally executed and then put on display in Milan, and along with his mistress. And here's Hitler realizing that, his days are numbered, And he figures things will go even worse for him than it did for Mussolini, as Mussolini was captured by Italians and this was done to him. But he knows the Russians will probably do much worse. Hitler realizes this. So Hitler decides to commit suicide because just days before he'd seen what happened with Mussolini. That last question, okay? Would it have prevented World War II if Mussolini had been killed in that mortar incident back on February 22nd, 1917? And I guess we'll never know for sure. And certainly an argument could be made, well, there were other right-wing Italians with similar ideas to Mussolini. He didn't come up with all of this on his own. And if Mussolini hadn't done this, somebody else would have. And you could make that same argument with Hitler. You know, if Hitler had never come to power in Germany, wouldn't someone else with those ideas that were out there and were becoming more popular, and with the dissatisfaction, with the depression and everything else going on there in Germany, wouldn't someone else have taken the reins and done, if not exactly what Hitler did, something similar to what Hitler did? You know, and you could say this, you know, again, the same thing about Mussolini. Well, ultimately, I don't know that that's the case. I feel like individuals in history really matter. And yes, there are forces that are bigger than the individual that make events happen. But ultimately, there have to be individuals to carry that out. And if Mussolini had been killed, would there have been someone else? I don't know that we can say that that would have happened for sure. And without the example of Mussolini in Italy, does Hitler ever come to power in Germany? I think maybe not. And so if you're asking me to take a stand on this one, I really do think that this could have prevented it. I mean, and maybe it's just wishful thinking. Maybe it's hoping that those horrors of World War II never happened, and maybe that's the case. But again, it's hard to say for sure. It's a great what if in history, and I love thinking about those kinds of what ifs. And this is one where, you know, maybe a lot of the horrors of the 20th century wouldn't have happened if just that mortar had exploded a little bit differently, or moments earlier or later. It's hard to say. Anyway, if you like what you've seen here today, please be sure to like and subscribe. And remember, you can watch another great Mr. Lewis video right here. And there's also another one right here. Thanks again.